It happened in the United States of America beginning in 2016 when Americans forgot the history of Germany and lessons hard won in World War II. It escalated in 2024 when Americans forgot what the path to power looked like for an autocratic leader. Appealing to mankind, the autocratic leader slowly gained followers by using fear tactics, distrust, and selfishness. Police overlooked ruthless perpetrators of crime while projecting a semblance of order by indiscriminately throwing people into jail. Gone were legal protections like innocent until proven guilty. Courts followed no rule of law. Only through bribes did people avoid long stays, torture, or death in prison. Women who remembered a time they were valued for their knowledge and abilities found themselves second-class citizens. They no longer had any say over their bodies. Abortion was completely banned and access to contraception became scarce. Overnight, women saw their hard-won advances in the workplace disappear. Equality between the sexes was null and void. The rich get richer, not because of their ingenuity or hard work, but because they were favored by those in power. Corruption became rampant. Enforcement of equal employment was replaced by nepotism. Without money, you were a nobody. You had no power. How could this happen in the land of plenty? This was a land that protected citizens and championed equality. It happened because Americans did not believe that something like Germany or Russia could happen to our nation. It happened because people became selfish and greedy. They had more than they needed and didn't care about others. Others were dismissed as unimportant and a nuisance to them. This is a tale about fate of those who suffered the brunt of cruelty and disregard when America lost democracy.
I am so glad to see you. Oh my goodness. You are not going to believe what my daughter just asked me. She asked me if I would rather die slowly or die quickly. I mean, I don't know if it's because she watched her grandfather die so slowly of cancer, or maybe it's because her father died so quickly at the hands of the federal police during his peaceful protest rally. I mean, is this the kind of thing you'd expect from your 10-year-old daughter? Right after her dad's loss, maybe she's not adjusted to it.
Janet, you are brave to even bring this up. I know you trust me, and I would never betray your trust. There's a lot of people who are afraid to even discuss this, but if we don't talk about the things that are happening, we're gonna go crazy.
You're right. If I dare do anything that makes me seem like I'm discontent, the federal police force will be on me. Because ever since Jim's death, I've been on a list as a rebel, and I can't really afford to be on that list. I have to file a travel permit to go visit my mother, and being on that list makes it really hard. The travel permits are expensive. We have to get a bus tickets for Kim and I. I mean, it's just, and I can't really afford it in my very tight budget. It's amazing how difficult it's gotten today. Everywhere. And I'm so worried about Kim because I am the only thing she has anymore, and I really can't be put into jail. We also need to be vigilant about getting together.
Yeah.
We should totally have the freedom to talk, but we have to really worry about being seen, because we'll be seen as rebels in an even bigger light than we are now.
Janet, I've been through the same loss, the same torment. I mean, I know I haven't lost my husband or child, but we too are on the watch list because I dared give my opinion about grocery problems. I mean, what is wrong with saying that the grocery is lacking essential needs? And don't get me started on the waiting 2 hours in a line just to get groceries and the exorbitant prices of milk and bread. It's no wonder we're all getting sick. We don't even have enough money to afford anything. And then I see the dictator's inner circle, driving around in their shiny cars. None of them even look like they missed a meal. And that smug look on their faces, the kind that says, I am important and you are not. You proletariats, you live lives of desperation and we do everything that you need. And you know what? They are right. Our lives are lives of desperation. I mean, we live in cages of fear. And the only thing that we can do is not step out of line, do everything that they tell us to do, and then I guess we're supposed to just be happy with that.
Remember when Jim and I first met you and Jeff? We went to restaurants all the time before the girls came, and we went to bars, we went dancing all night. We were at times of freedom and abundance. And now that the dictator has arrived, there's no freedom, there is no abundance. The dictator reserves the majority of the nation's wealth for himself. He is siphoning America's assets to the wealthy and his good friends.
So much has changed in the past 3 years. I mean, everyone fears the federal police, but for good reason. It's no longer protect and serve. It's do the dictator's bidding or be arrested because you pose a threat to the dictator. Everyone is always getting arrested or getting dragged out of their houses, never to return. You know, and most loved ones just never see them again. We must tread softly. If we speak up and voice dissent, then we might be dragged off to those places of no return as well. And then people might get so desperate or so crazy that they will speak up and protest. But because of everyone around us, if we do the same, then they may pay a price as well. If we try to take a stand, what would happen to our children if we're put into prison? They would be left alone in this ruthless world. I keep hearing stories about child slavery and sex trafficking, and there is no doubt in my mind that the worst treatment imaginable would be given to Phyllis or Kim if something happened to us. I mean, you would think they would be protected, but those rights were evaporated long ago. The police are in the dictator's pockets. The courts are a joke. There's no child protection agency. There is no safety net to protect people anymore. The elderly die alone in their homes, and children roam the street, begging for mercy and food.
Are you sure no one saw you coming?
It's so nice to see you.
It's good to see you.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, I'm getting very good at hiding my tracks. I go from store to store, I go past my destination, then I turn around and come back towards your house and keep looking behind me. If anybody followed me, they'd get dizzy.
Out of all of us, you are the most meticulous at making sure you're not being followed.
So who
Well,
else?
now
is
we're just
gonna-
waiting for Pam and Catherine to show.
Okay.
Well, Catherine and Pam aren't coming tonight.
What?
They were on the way here and it looked like a man was following them.
Oh my God.
That's something we all need to be very careful of. Jim was accused of being a rebel because he was at a protest rally. And now I'm accused of being a rebel too. And Ann was accused of being a rebel because of the grocery store incident. The federal police force watch our movements more than they do others.
Well, I'm all for continuing to meet. I mean, we just need to make plans so that we don't establish patterns that they'll pay attention to and think we're hatching some sort of subversive plot.
Jacqueline, before you got here, I was telling Ann that Kim asked me if I would rather die quickly or die slowly. And I know that you know her father died very unexpectedly at the hand of the police force, but also her grandfather died really slowly of cancer. What do you think I should say to Kim?
Janet, my children are grown and they have children, and I'm worried about all of them. I mean, how can we raise confident, responsible kids in this kind of an environment? Look where we are now. I mean, they can't look forward to better days. Good people are murdered on the street every day. They pick up on our depression and our anxiety. I mean, they can't even go anywhere, their neighborhood, their home, their church even, without hearing of these things. No wonder their questions are about death. Death might be the only escape from this world for now. I wish I had a better answer for you about Kim's question. It's obvious that she is upset about dying. But maybe if you asked her what upsets her, if she's upset about her dying, or is she upset because she's afraid someone else dear to her will die, then maybe she'll open up to you and you can figure out what's really bothering her.
You know, Phyllis asked me a weird question the other day. She asked if I had a choice about being blind, would I prefer to be born blind and not know the beauty of nature, or have sight for as long as I could? You know, I couldn't answer it. I mean, most people would want to have sight for as long as they could, but just the torture of not knowing the beauty out there, it's hard. I couldn't answer. I mean, most people would want to have sight for as long as they could, but the torture of knowing what you lost after going blind, I mean, that's a heavier burden. I told her I would think about her answer and then I would get back to her. I thought about her question later and I couldn't answer it. I mean, we are like those people who had sight and lost it later. I mean, we had democracy. We had freedom. And we just didn't know the treasure we had until we lost it. It tortures me that we had the best of world governments and we allowed it to be yanked from us. You know, it started with the Great Divide. The Great Divide of the groups of people. First it was the Chinese, then it was the immigrants, and then the Middle Easterners, then the assault on the Capitol on January 6th. I mean, that alone should have alerted us to the evil that was in this country. I mean, the dictator's zealots were so bent on the fact that he lost the presidency because of the rigged voting system. And then Vice President Pence, who stood up to them and stated that that was not true. I mean, they went against them. They attacked him. I mean, I think they even said that someone had a massive guillotine outside one of his rallies. It's just, when Vice President Pence followed the law and verified that the election was not rigged, he was vilified. They even built gallows for him. And then after Vice President Pence escaped that murderous plot, I mean, they were still attacking him online.
That's true.
And now we can't even stand up for our children. Did I tell y'all, Phyllis, one time she came home crying and looked as if she was got into a fight. And she told me that she was being bullied. So the next day, I went to the teacher to talk to her, and instead of being sympathetic, she looked at me and said, "Phyllis must be lying. We don't allow bullying and violence in our school." And you know what? Her face contorted in pain as she said that to me. That told me everything I needed to know. That if she dared stand up and expressed her feelings about what was happening in that school, she would be labeled a rebel and then lose her job. Like I said, we have no way of protecting our children and standing up for them.
Warning signs were all about in our country, and we were all asleep.
Right.
Nobody believed that an orange-headed buffoon who peddled violence and hatred could take over our country. And now, our children are like those born blind. They will never know the joys of freedom and democracy. I could have done more when I became aware, but I didn't. And no, I didn't vote for the dictator. I don't know how anyone could have voted for him with all his lies. I mean, the man just doesn't know how to tell the truth. I remember the lies he told about Obama.
Yes.
And he wasn't born in the U.S. And what about, oh, I can walk down Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and people will still vote for me. And what about Hillary, the nasty woman who had a private server at home that was bad for national security? That was another one of his lies. Oh, guys, I don't know. But he didn't care. I mean, his lies allowed him to deflect criticism from himself and put it on other people.
I didn't realize the impact of him placing conservatives on the U.S. Supreme Court. Now Roe v. Wade has been overturned. We no longer have voices protecting our bodies. Even contraceptives are being challenged. He has pushed back the women's movement progress to the early 1900s. Democracy failed because he destroyed the checks and balances that kept everything safe. The U.S. Supreme Court was clearly under his control. All he had to do was capture the executive branch again. Then there was nothing stopping him from getting complete control over our nation's decision and resources.
You know, Jacqueline, the most haunting feeling I have is guilt. I really wish I could give Kim the kind of carefree childhood that I had. If I had just spoken up sooner, maybe more people would have stepped up and done something. Maybe more people would have voted. Some days, I feel almost suicidal. But then I realize what that would do to Kim, and I can't leave her alone in this vicious world.
Now listen, if you ever get that desperate, you call me. I mean it. I will be there for you. You know, I admitted that when we lost our freedoms, we lost our democracy. And recently I've been thinking about what we've become. And I've been thinking and reading about other countries, Nazi Germany in the 40s, Iraq, Russia, China, and comparing them to what we have now. And when a country is led by a dictator who's a tyrant, there are dangers. And I made a list here. Let me read it to you. When a dictator rules, this is what it looks like. There's only one dominant political party. The dictator has supreme authority to make laws and control all economic, political, and social decisions. I mean, this is what we have. There's only propaganda-based news because freedom of the press and truth-based media coverage is banned, right? The dictator controls the military, the police, and the federal police force. He controls too much. Justice systems are rigged and fair trials evaporate. Citizens have no protections or safety in any judicial system. There are no rights for free speech or peaceful assembly. There are no regularly scheduled elections. So the dictator can rule for life or for decades until they die. The dictator's rise to power and his unlimited term reign is rooted in the nation's fanatic far-right element.
Wow.
As I studied other governments in other times, I go, there we go again. History is repeating itself. And will be just as tragic as those other countries if this continues.
The group explored warning signs that America was losing democracy. They recalled the Great Divide in our country. They recalled that the dictator actively interfered with Obama's presidency and Clinton's presidential bid. The dictator gained control over the Republican Party with one-party dominance. The Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, signaling the end of a woman's right to make her own decisions about her body. The antagonism between Republicans and Democrats in the legislature continued. The gap between the two parties widened. The nation was stalemated. Democracy was crumbling, and no person or government agency was strong enough to stop the decay.
How did we get here so fast?
Well, instead of the dictator taking responsibility or being impeached or prosecuted for everything he did at the Capitol, he twisted the facts like he always does. It makes me so angry. Can you believe it? He told an angry group to march to the Capitol and, quote, give them the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country, unquote. Following his command, they marched down Pennsylvania Avenue and they violently stormed the Capitol. Meanwhile, for over 3 hours, he sat in the White House watching the desecration of our Capitol unfold on television. He was confronted by his staff and fellow Republicans who begged him to intervene and stop the violence. Yet, he refused to call in reinforcements for over 3 hours. He finally sent a Twitter message to his followers to tell them to stop, while he also praised them for standing firm because the election was stolen from us. It's that lie that prompted the vicious assault. Wouldn't anyone else be called a traitor and tried and found guilty for dereliction of duty? The dictator had this troop of lawyers on speed dial, and they dealt with his extramarital conquests, the workers he stiffed, and even his corrupt business practices. I think he got so accustomed to just sliding by without any consequences that his ego and stunts grew bigger and bolder. He became Mr. Untouchable.
I'm sorry, your wrist is giving you trouble.
Sometimes it happens.
Remember when half the country sighed a sigh of relief when he lost the 2020 election?
Mm-hmm.
I saw what he was doing as soon as he left office. He was building up his coffers so he could fortify his support so that he would have it ready for when he ran for the 2024 election. That was when we should have gotten with like-minded people and taken aggressive action. That's what I feel most guilty about. If I would have taken action then, maybe Phyllis wouldn't have to grow up in such a depressive environment that just chews everyone up. Kids, adults, the elderly.
And I know it seems like we got into this really quickly with lightning speed. But in reality, I think this has been building up for decades even. There's no doubt that Russia and Putin have always been attractive to the dictator. And Russia and Putin were involved in the 2016 and 2020 elections. Now, why was Putin so concerned about American elections that only had Trump in them? The dictator built up his stage presence years ago on The Apprentice.
You're right.
But what a joke. I mean, all he did was bully and be nasty to people. And who decided to put him on television anyway?
Not me.
I wouldn't be surprised if the dictator was groomed for the presidency for years, maybe even by Russia. What's a more perfect plan to gain control over Russia's greatest adversary than to control the American president?
Do you remember when the dictator wanted to buy Greenland?
Oh, so weird.
Now most people say, buy a country, that's absurd. But would it really be absurd for two narcissistic personalities to use violence to get what they want? Greenland is important now because it has large amounts of rare earth metals that they use in mobile tablets, electric cars, and computers. At present, China is the primary supplier of the rare earth metals. If Trump were to buy Greenland, then I could just see him using his dictatorship to gain control of the country and overthrow their government.
Oh my God. I was fixated on how he's devastated the United States. But now I see that he could actually spread his evil around the world. The dictator even copied Hitler's motto of "Make Germany Great Again" by saying, "Make America Great Again." When Hitler grabbed the reins of power in Germany, it wasn't enough for him. He wanted to take over weaker countries like Poland and then go to Europe. He wanted to take over the whole world.
Former White House Russia specialist Fiona Hill claims that the dictator idolizes Putin. He even met alone with Putin when they were at a summit in Helsinki. Their similarities is most likely why the dictator calls Putin a great leader. It is no secret that Putin's goal is to reunite the Eastern Bloc of Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, the former Czechoslovakia, and the former Yugoslavia under the Soviet Union umbrella. The dictator is pulling all the U.S. support from Ukraine. That signals a green light for Russia to escalate their efforts to conquer their neighboring countries. The specter of two psychopaths joining together to conquer the rest of the world is becoming more and more likely.
Think about what the world would look like if Trump and Putin were to carry out Hitler's plan. I mean, Hitler exterminated 6 million Jews. While Putin hasn't reached that kind of notoriety, I mean, ethnic minorities are being punished and mistreated in Russia. I mean, the dictator has begun his purge of rebels so that he's sicking his federal police on Americans and arresting them for next to nothing.
And shooting him. Jim.
Like innocent Jews led to the gas chamber. The only crime of American arrestees is that they were born different from Trump and Putin. I mean, think of what our world would look like if the U.S. would have never entered World War II. I mean, they would have never created the great deterrent, the atomic bomb. Today, the bomb might not be a deterrent, but the dictator could definitely use it to force submission. If the dictator controlled more of the world, there would be no end to his malicious use of American resources. Military, courts, the police, tools of destruction. More people would die. People would hate America even more than they do now. Is there anything we can do now? I mean, I can't even come up with anything that won't endanger the lives of our children. But if this spreads more worldwide, then we wouldn't even be able to leave this place and move to a better place outside of the U.S.
The women discussed events leading to the dissolution of democracy. It was glaring that the dictator incited a crowd to storm the Capitol and then sat for over 3 hours while the building was decimated and lives were lost and endangered. The Capitol is a sacred symbol of America's democracy. To suggest that a crowd disrespect in any way is anti-American, that anyone could escape serious consequences for dereliction of duty or inciting violence showed that democracy was deteriorating. The path to power of this dictator may have been a coordinated and decades-old plan. A Trump-Putin alliance made the women shiver as they pictured a world without liberty or citizen protections.
So sorry to be so late.
It's all right. Hey, how was your week last week?
Oh, Janet.
First of all, let me apologize. We really wanted to be here last week, and Pam and I were together. We were walking, and this guy seemed to be following us everywhere. And we tried to wiggle around and get away, but we got scared, and we decided it's better not to lead it to your house. So we turned around and we went back home. So I'm really sorry we had to do that. But my week, real downer. I had another client commit suicide this past week. And I don't know what to do. Most of my clients are just so depressed. They're just hopeless. And, you know, I'm trying the best I can as a therapist, but I'm hopeless too. How can I encourage them when I don't think that there's a good future for me even? So how can I really help them?
I'm teaching a lot of young adults who are expecting to go out into the world and earn a decent living. But they should know that everything they do and anything they achieve is being controlled by overlookers who are first and foremost demanding compliance with the rules. If they go into any branch of government, the police, the military, it's expected that they will conform to every tedious government rule. Freedom of speech and academic freedom are definitely things of the past.
My granddaughter had an experience like that.
Well, you two are echoing our sentiments from last week. I mean, depression and hopelessness are toxic and contagious. And what upsets me is just this discussion about the dictator's probable endgame. I mean, he won't be satisfied with just taking the US presidency or taking away America's democracy. Him and Putin are trying to forcibly take over countries, especially Greenland. And being locked up by fear, okay, we're used to that in this society, but taking away our chance to leave, to escape to a better place, it's suffocating.
It might not be helpful for me to bring up positive energy, but I've been reading lately and I read this saying that stuck with me. If you don't know where you're headed, you might end up somewhere else. So maybe we can focus on where it is we want to go. I mean, it might be fantasy, but having a dream is more worthwhile.
I have no problem telling you what I want. I want to go back to a time when America was indeed the land of the free and the home of the brave. I want the freedom to become what I want to be. I want the bravery to charge forward knowing that there are legal safeguards protecting my rights, my individual rights. We don't even know what individual rights are in this post-democracy America. Do we have any rights?
No.
Any bravery? I am so afraid of everything. If I speak up, I could be put in prison. If I offend a person in power, my life is in danger. So no, I am not brave. And I don't see anyone willing and ready to stand up to the one person who is in charge of all the lawlessness and makes all the decisions. I really want to get back to an America that is the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Well, I just want to be able to trust again. And you know, one of the first things that the dictator did to undermine us was to call everything that he didn't like fake news. And the television stations that rallied behind him became propaganda machines for him. So now, I don't know what to believe. Probably none of us does.
I agree with you. I mean, trust is a big issue. For me, coming from where I'm coming from, for the psychologist, I want a nation that really cares about each other and has good mental health. But when you look at our leader, when the leader doesn't have good mental health, then that spells doom for the rest of us. So, when you think about what's happened in the past years of the type of language that is used about Mexicans, about Middle Easterners, about Chinese, and look what he said about blacks. When the looting starts, the shooting begins. I mean, that really, that's a threat. I'm sorry, that is just a threat.
They started. Yeah.
I haven't seen a divide of such hatred and animosity ever in my lifetime, but if you think about America, probably you have to go back to the Civil War before you can say that type of divide has happened.
That's where we are.
Yeah, that's where we are. So if I had one wish, it would be for people to learn to be civil, to be caring about each other, to be respectful of people with different ideas, different looks, different opinions, and just respect each other.
I agree with everything you all said. What I most want back is the democracy. I mean, democracy had rules. We had the power to vote for our representatives. I mean, the laws protected all of the citizens of America. Police would provide a safe environment, and people respected the rights, and we were considered equal. Just democracy, without it, I mean, we lost everything. Before it, I had a good education, and I was able to work in an amazing place until I lost my job. I mean, they didn't even give me a reason for why I was fired. All because I wrote a letter talking about the horrible conditions about the grocery stores, the electrical and gas system, and the horrid labor conditions. Now I have to pick up freelance work wherever I can. I can't provide the same future for my daughter as I used to.
These are the same fears that I have for my students.
I just want back the power I had before everything happened. To be able to speak up when things weren't right and to be protected if I ever got fired. Democracy really protected all of us.
Well, we all have ideas about what we want and how we want our futures to go. But I'm surprised that nobody said anything about reinstating rights for women. That's a big one.
Huge.
I've experienced firsthand how devastating the Supreme Court's decision to abolish Roe versus Wade is and was. My granddaughter was raped by a man that she didn't know very well. She didn't press charges because she couldn't win the battle of he said, she said in court. So we were at a loss about where to go for help with this. Being unmarried and having a baby meant she would lose her job. Also, her boss never let women stay past the third trimester. And as you know, abortions are abolished in the U.S. right now. Going to a hospital or a doctor would mean that the pregnancy would be detected. And then she'd be monitored and forced to have the baby. If we tried to leave the country, she'd be flagged at the airport. So we decided that we'd go into Canada. And she used her papers from her younger sister because they both look alike. And we were in Montreal for 4 weeks on a tourist visa. And she was able to have an abortion there. But now her state is banning contraceptives. So we're worried. I'm worried that if she gets pregnant again, she's going to be in big trouble. I can't believe that women stood by when all of our rights were taken and they didn't solidify, and come together and defeat the dictator.
That's true.
I don't get it.
I mean, don't women realize that if we have no right to say what to do with our own bodies, we have no power at all?
That's right.
Some women expect men to take care of them, just like they did in World War II times. Oh, and that's horrible because it just results in miserable marriages and too many children. I don't know how we get there, but I want a future where women are respected and aren't second-class citizens. Since our voting rights were taken away, and the president can stay in power for as long as he wants, I don't see a way to get our rights back in a peaceful way. I just don't know what we can do. Let's do something positive with our thoughts.
Okay.
A day may come when our dreams can become a reality.
Great.
Catherine, a psychologist, and Pam, a university professor, joined the group. Catherine reports that depression is rampant among her clients, and 3 have committed suicide within the last year. Pam reports that academic freedom is gone at the university. The women are still shaken by the image of a Trump-Putin alliance that could take over control of the world. Jacqueline suggests a shift from the depressing vision of a dire worldwide future to thinking about what they would want reinstated if they had a chance to change current-day America.
Students come in and out of here all the time, and because of the constant flow of people, I don't think any of the federal police are paying attention.
Good idea.
So I think we'll be okay here for a couple of meetings.
Well, I know we're all in dire straits because we're living under a dictator who rules everything about our lives. But I must admit that I got frantic after the last meeting when I was thinking about the dictator and Putin getting together and possibly doing horrible things to take over the world. I don't understand why people don't see this, why the masses don't see this possibility happening, that they're evil, and that the carnage they've already caused is horrendous. What will it take to wake the masses up to the evils that are in our world and the consequences of not seeing them?
I see you looking at me, so I guess I'm the psychologist. I'm supposed to tell you all about
Please
evil
explain
people.
it. Yes.
To be real honest, psychology doesn't deal in more spiritual terms like evil, bad, that type of thing, but we do deal with personality disorders. And I can tell you about some personality disorders that would be linked with autocratic leaders, and they also are linked with doing harmful things to other people. Is that what you'd like me to do? To tell you about that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know what the dictator had done, but it wasn't until his first term that I saw he wasn't too bright. He kept firing his staff. He had so many wives and affairs, and then he drummed up so much hatred at his rallies. I didn't realize he was evil until the Capitol was attacked and desecrated, and he was watching it on television and smiling.
Yeah.
And then I realized his evil was contagious. There were people who were willing to commit atrocities on his behalf, and they were willing to support him, and it spread like wildfire. So tell me, what clues were evident that showed his groundswell before it grew to massive numbers?
Okay, let me start by talking about the psychopath and the narcissistic personality disorders. Because when you're talking about autocratic leaders, they're probably going to fall in those 2 categories, and probably jointly both of those categories. There's 4 basic points to remember. Number 1, they do not have a conscience. They don't feel shame or blame. Number 2, they're emotionally undeveloped people. Number 3, they oftentimes show immoral behavior. And number 4, the narcissist shows that everything is about him or her. So if you're looking at those 4, then you're looking at somebody that can hurt other people without any shame or blame, because to them, people are just objects. People are a game of win or lose, and they have to lose. They're not going to let other people win. If you let emotionally undeveloped, very insensitive, very uncaring of other people, they really enjoy harming people. They get a kick out of that. Doesn't bother them at all. If you look at immoral behavior, what you're looking at is cheating, stealing, the type of behaviors that they can't stay loyal or can't be in a relationship for any time. They tend to be philanderers in relationships. And lying, they lie all the time. So you're seeing a lot of immoral behaviors. When you look at the narcissistic part, everything's about them. Their truth is the only truth that matters. Now keep in mind, they're liars, so their truth is not like any other people's truth. They demand loyalty from other people, strict loyalty, but they don't give loyalty to anybody else. So that's what you're talking about here. Does that remind you of any people?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see how some or most or all of these behaviors describe people we know, like our dictator or Putin. And I guess I didn't think about this so much. I didn't understand it this way during the last election. Now, I didn't vote for him because I don't like him. But I realize now that from the platform that I have to reach students and to just generally talk with people, I realize that I probably should have used a little more thought in how I engaged students and talked about world events. And you know, as an educator, you try not to too closely steer thinking, but in this case, it really would have been beneficial if I had said more.
The thing that worries me is that so many people buy into his lies. And they're hypnotized by his rhetoric. I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, how can so many of us see the evil in the dictator, and others, they worship him as if he was the Messiah? I mean, when and how do we help the people who believe in this dictator to see what the truth really is?
I have been listening really intently to what you said, Catherine, and I just have to say that I'm really concerned about the doom and gloom of it all. I agree that those characteristics totally talk about people like Hitler, as Stalin, Putin, and a lot of other autocratic leaders. But knowing and agreeing that we can see evil doesn't mean that everybody can agree to it at the same time. As long as half of our country refuses to believe the evil of the dictator, that I don't know how we can have a future for the U.S. or even the world.
Well, my education is about trying to understand how people think the way they do, and how you might be able to help change that if they want to change. So cognitive science explains that, and without going into the gobbledygook of science, all I'm going to tell you is that very early in life, we learn our perceptions, our feelings, our thoughts. We learn them from our parents because they're our role models. So if you are raised in a family with very conservative, ultra-right parents, more than likely you're going to have those type of thoughts and feelings and perceptions. And the same with the more liberal. You'll lean that way. But different surveys, and one from Princeton says that 40-some percent, 41, 42% of voters will say that they are independent. In other words, they can lean one way or another, and they're independent thinkers. Now, let's look at the facts. Let's see what makes sense. So those are the ones that we're going to have to appeal to. If we ever have a chance to appeal again to voters. They're the open-minded people. So you're looking at people like college youth. They're in a period of change and new ideas, and they're going to be open to those type of possibilities. We're looking, I think, in this case, women. You know, women aren't treated good in this paternalistic society, and so they might be open to change. I think blacks certainly have not been treated well at all, but really all minorities, in the case of what we're dealing with, all minorities have been treated poorly. So you're talking about a large block of voters that could change their opinion. I think it's pretty apparent that Putin and Trump are part of the old boy system. They're the good old boys, the white males. And, you know, that's served throughout history, at least to some degree. But I think a large number of us now are getting tired of the paternalistic system because it doesn't serve us. So we're getting tired of the big daddy system, and it's time for a change.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but are you saying that there may be hope if we can get the word out to the right target groups that our nation's democracy is being destroyed?
I think that's the only hope we have. That one day there will be enough of a chance to influence those people that are independent thinkers to not vote the way they have before. The far right is not the majority in America. And we have to appeal to the masses.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
Catherine stated that evil is not defined in psychology. However, personality disorders that lead to behaviors that hurt others are defined in psychology. She gave definitions of a narcissist and a psychopath.
I was energized by our talk before lunch. I've been thinking about how to approach this problem of getting people to realize the danger that faces us nationally and internationally.
That sounds like a good idea. If we know the reasons for the democracy's undoing, then we can reconstruct the system by reversing it. The white male system was so upset when Obama was elected president. Then the Democrats put a woman presidential candidate up next, and that pissed them off even more. Putting a woman and a black man up as president seemed like an insult to the far right, because they believed that only people that looked like them could be president of the United States. They firmly believed that only white men were acceptable as presidents of the nation. Remember, the dictator became a banner carrier of criticism for both Obama and Hillary. He clung to that infamous lie that Obama was not from the United States. And then when Hillary came along, he kept saying that nasty woman who belongs in jail. He was so brash and had no concern for the truth that he made them look vulnerable. His criticism caused the fanatical far right to just join his causes and be along with him for like all his hate-filled speeches and just everything he stood for. Obama had had strong support from black voters and liberals. And Hillary, even though her support wasn't as strong, especially with black voters, she still won the popular vote. And she would have won the presidency if we did not have the electoral college system, which was created by Thomas Jefferson because he wanted to keep the South as a dominant factor in the national government. If we would have done these elections like we do the state elections, one vote, one person, Hillary would have won and the dictator would have lost the election and would have never became president.
That was the ultimate reason why Trump got elected in the first place. There was something very fishy about James Comey deciding to investigate Hillary's emails, personal emails.
Yeah. No reason.
Those really put the nail in her coffin.
Yeah.
2 weeks before the election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comey, previously ruled that the personal emails were fine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Forgot that.
But for some mysterious reason, he reopened the investigation.
Yeah.
Previous secretaries of state, like Colin Powell, was found to use personal email, and,
Yep.
and that wasn't a problem.
Of course not.
So, just before the Comey investigation was reopened, Rudy Giuliani, Trump's lawyer, and Trump leaked that there was something about to be discovered.
Oh, yeah.
And so how did they know, and how did this happen? So again, my question is, where did this information come from? Was it the Russians? And by the way, Hillary's investigation turned up that she was not charged, right?
Yeah.
By the way. But I wonder how much influence the Russians really have had on our election.
Ay.
Scary.
Well, as you know, the Russian government has been hacking into our affairs for years and years.
Yeah.
And in 2020, hackers breached a U.S. cybersecurity firm. That one of these firms that serves the federal government, energy, commerce, treasury,
Wow.
all the important things. And there's just no way to tell how much they did or what the impacts of.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. That's really scary. Really scary.
We certainly know about Trump's interference with Obama's presidency and Hillary's bid for the presidency. He bullied his way into American politics as early as Obama's presidency, and he has been a deciding force since then.
Well, what we have to also remember is that he had been building up his fan base for years. He was applying pressure to all types of factions. He was reaching out to the Proud Boys, and they are factions of hope, hate, and violence. So that really did build up the division in the United States. Hate crimes rose in the United States when he pointed out the Mexicans, the Chinese, the Asians, any group. When he said, when the looting begins, the shooting is going to start, when Black Lives Matter. Anytime he said something like that, hate crimes rose. And the United States became more and more divided. And it wasn't just Republicans and Democrats. It was friends and family that got divided. When people gave up being empathetic and stood their grounds very obstinately, not willing to listen to other people anymore, not willing to understand. That's when we lost democracy.
Also, we can't overlook that the dictator was using his finances and money to influence legislators at both the national and the state level. He actively attacked Democratic legislators and filled their positions with his own cronies. He was slanderous to all the Democrats and punished people who disapproved of him. He had the Republican Party sewed up by the time he took office. He actively got people around him and could control them if they would support him. Then he worked on stacking the Supreme Court with justices who were just as conservative as him. And Roe versus Wade was eliminated. And he took credit for it because he stacked the court with these judges. That's how he destroyed democracy. As president, he took control of all three parts of the government.
We've seen how the dictator's actions have affected our democracy, and to get a clearer view of how everything really has been affected by his actions, I made a list of all of the things about a true democracy of what we have to have. Get this out. All right, for a nation to claim that a democracy is the frame that undergirds and holds together their nation, the following basic rules and practices must be in place. 1, there is a political plurality, having at least 2 parties with approximate power in democracies to balance each other. 2, democracies have separate and independent governmental units providing checks and balances. 3, democracies have separate and independent court systems that base objective decisions on constitutional and procedural laws. Courts must ensure fair handling of complaints regarding illegal and criminal actions, unfairness, injustice, or suppression of citizens' rights. 4, a democratic government has military and criminal justice agencies, including police, that are fair and objective in enforcing laws without suppressing the rights of law-abiding citizens. Procedural laws are needed that disallow excessive force and unlawful arrest. Only authorized police, military, or criminal justice officials can enforce law. 5, a democracy provides for regularly scheduled elections of executive and legislative leaders. Voters must have unimpeded voting access. There needs to be practices to check for fair voting. Term limits are given for elected officials. Laws are established that limit foreign campaign funding of political candidates. 6, there is no suppression of free speech unless speech incites violence towards others. Orderly and peaceful citizen protests or rallies are allowed. Laws are enforced that protect the freedom of the media and the press. 7, a democracy provides equal and fair access to education and job opportunities for citizens. 8, a democracy upholds individual freedom and citizen equality.
My. This dictator has destroyed all the elements of democracy in our nation. One by one, he has stripped it away to the point where it no longer exists in America. At least we know how to get it reinstated. Get back what we once had.
The one thing the dictator could not take away was us. We, the people, are still here, and he needs us.
You're right.
He needs people to provide taxes to run the country. He needs people to do the work of the country.
Yep.
When enough people are fed up with the dictator's treatment of them, they will find a way to stop working, or they will find a way to try and stop the dictator.
The group reviewed the dictator's neglect of the sanctity of American democratic symbols and institutions eroded democracy. The dictator used the period between 2020 and 2024 to build his coffers to support legislative Republican candidates that would do his bidding. The dictator built his fanatical fan base of followers like the Proud Boys. The dictator demonized ethnic and racial groups and fanned the flames of hatred and division in the country. He stacked the U.S. Supreme Court with conservatives. The dictator's supporters did not value morality, decency, or respect of others. Characteristics of a democracy. For a nation to claim it is a democracy, it needs a vigorous and equal 2 or more party system to ensure balanced representation. Separate and independent legislative, judicial, and executive systems providing checks and balances on each other. Separate and independent court systems, local, state, and federal, based on constitutionally based legal interpretations and procedural law enforcement. Military and criminal justice entities with policies that are fair and objective in enforcing laws. Regularly scheduled local, state, and federal elections with unimpeded voter access to election process. Protection of free speech unless such speech incites violence. Equal and fair access to education and job opportunities for all citizens. Protection of individual freedoms and citizen equality.
May we unite to create an America that values love over hate, courage over fear, hope over despair, faith over emptiness, and peace over violence. Let wisdom and compassion defeat the powers of evil and destruction. May we create an America that sustains and nourishes our children and honors the legacy of our forefathers.